Good morning, everyone. Uh, I've been up pretty much all night, of course, trying to get things squared away and packed and thinking and blah, blah, blah. So I thought I'd take a break and read some emails. Um, the one that struck me the most right now, maybe it's because of all the crap I'm going through, I don't know, but it hits pretty close to home with me because I have it. I have this condition. It is called agoraphobia. Um, the original question was, and I think I've touched on this before. If you have some sort of mental disorder or a disability of any type, um, can you be an effective witch? Well, yes. Um, just because a person has agoraphobia, which is the fear, of being in large crowds, being out in large spaces, a feeling that if something was to happen, nobody would help. It's just a fear of fear. Does that make sense? um, a lot of people won't leave their homes that have this condition. Um, it varies, it depends on how bad you have it. Mine, when I first figured out that something was wrong, I was about 16, I guess. And in fact, I was in school. I was in my first hour of school, and I may have told y'all this, but to make a long story short, our teacher, I had Algebra 1, my first hour class, first thing in the morning. Imagine that. Would let us bring something to drink in there. So I had brought in a Dr. Pepper, and honestly, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, my brain started thinking all this stuff, and so I can't even explain how fast the thought process was and where they all led. And eventually, I was just in a sheer panic, to the point to where I was shaking. My eyelids were twitching. I mean, my facial muscles were twitching. I was just shaking literally from my head to my toes, and I couldn't talk. Every time I try to talk, I would just stutter. So at first, I just got up and left the classroom, ran to the principal's office. I mean, I thought I was dying. I truly thought something was wrong with me. And there was. But when I got to the principal's office, of course, the first thing that he asked was if I had done any drugs that morning. And I was like, no, I don't do drugs. So he's like, well, you said you had a Dr. Pepper. Do you think anybody might have put anything in it? I said, nobody was around my Dr. Pepper. And I was having a really hard time answering these questions because I was literally in so much fear. I hadn't ever before or since had that kind of fear. I just can't, unless you've had an anxiety or panic attack, you just don't understand that kind of fear. And it's extremely hard to explain. And you don't even know why you're afraid most of the time. The feeling that you can't breathe, there's all different kinds of things that goes along with it. Mainly that you can't breathe and you're just panicked. As I said, some people have to take medication for it. Some people have it to different degrees, like me. For a long time, for 3 days, I know I couldn't talk. It was almost like that. I just left my body. I was there, but I was like way down deep inside of myself looking out, but I had no control over what was going on with my physical body. I hear the Christians now saying, just pray it away. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that just don't work. But anyway, I had a hell of a time. And I remember it was the hardest thing I have ever done. I had to literally pull myself out of that mental state. And that is extremely hard to do. I mean, I just made myself stop doing this. And back when this happened, this was in the early 80s. Nobody had ever heard of this. Nowadays, if people say, oh, they have an anxiety disorder, well, that's common talk now. Back then, it was not, it was unheard of, except for the people that were experiencing these things. And anyway, so one day I was watching Oprah. Was already grown, married. I had kind of gotten over that. And everything had been fine. And then all of a sudden, she has this on her show talking about it. This was probably in 1986. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what happened to me when I was a junior in high school. And I couldn't speak or do anything for 3 days straight. I was in just a sheer panic. I was literally frozen in fear and had no idea why. And so all these other people were talking about it. And anyway, so yes, I have that condition. But with mine, like that one time it happened, okay, well, I got it in my head that it was just a one-time thing. I didn't know what it was. I had just left a girls' home that I had been raised in. I had just experienced my very first real boyfriend getting killed on his motorcycle. Maybe all these different things had manifested into something that I wasn't aware of, and it caused me to react this way. So I went on, and I didn't have one for a long time. I did have trouble driving a car for some reason. It just seemed whenever I got behind the wheel, everything changed because I just did not feel comfortable. Number one, because I thought, well, if I have a wreck, what if I kill somebody else? Maybe I'm not mentally fit to be driving. And then I'd start the ball rolling until I would work myself up. And it's like, no, you got to stop that. I still get treated like I'm a monster sometimes for not having the best social skills because of trauma and amongst a slew of other things. Yeah, unfortunately, the people that, for lack of a better term, the people that are well, they don't understand any type of mental illness. And to me, this is a mental illness. It's something that that occurs in the brain. There for a long time, they said it was some sort of vitamin or mineral imbalance, that some part of the brain was misfiring. Well, most of the time, if the brain's misfiring, yeah, it's going to cause some sort of mental disorder, of course, but for whatever reason that people have these, it doesn't, how do I put it? It doesn't change them as an individual. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say. just because they have these fears doesn't mean that they're not smart individuals, that they cannot be an effective witch. Okay. Um, Now, I disagree with some people that say no matter what disorder you have, um, you can still be an effective witch. Well, I disagree with that. Um, First of all, I've been in the medical field my entire life, and I've worked from the office to the floor. Um, you name it, I've done it pretty much. And I know for a fact that if you suffer from schizophrenia, untreated schizophrenia, there's no way you can do witchcraft, because your brain has got to be able to stay focused enough to put out your spells, to put out your incantations, um, to be able to meditate, or and a schizophrenic mind that is not medicated cannot possibly do this. I mean, and it's not saying anything bad about people with schizophrenia, but untreated, they don't know what they're doing, or who's really talking to them, or um, who's really there, who's not. You cannot possibly be and be an effective witch, do your spells with these sort of things going off in your head. Um, Now, if it's treated with medication, yes, there's some witches that'll say, well, if you're on medication or drugs or anything, you can't do witchcraft either. Well, that's neither here nor there. I don't know that. I don't even know how they would prove that, unless you're just so drug out that once again, you don't know what you're saying or doing. But a person that takes their medication the right way, the way it's prescribed, um, will be just fine. All it is treating the condition in whichever form. May it be chemical, it may be a chemical imbalance. So therefore, there's being a chemical added to your brain to where your brain can function, healthy wise. And there's very few that I just really don't, and even those, like I said, on the medication taken correctly, then they also can be effective witches. I don't think I'm schizophrenic, but I do think there are certain things about the spirit realm that doctors can. Oh, well, yeah. Yeah. And, Aiden, that's funny because I worked in a psych hospital. I was the administrative assistant to the director of nursing. And the reason that she hired me was because of my former nursing experience. And I mean, I've seen a lot of different people come and go. And, when I'd go home in the evenings, I'd often wonder, well, you know, uh, witches, you know, may hear spirits, may experience them touching them. All the things that everybody else calls us crazy for thinking and believing in and knowing because it's happened to us, uh, there you go. But I mean, there's a difference, um, schizophrenics, you just have to read up on the disease. It's, or condition. I believe schizophrenia is actually considered a disease, but, yeah, I mean, you think back in the old days, this is where, and I hate to call people back then stupid, but they really were. They were uneducated, extremely ill-informed, and very non-wavering in their beliefs. So when they had somebody that had a mental illness like schizophrenia, if you're around somebody that has schizophrenia and you're not aware that they have that disease, you're not prepared and do not know how to react to them or how to deal with them if they're having an episode, then it's going to freak you out. You're going to think that this person all of a sudden was possessed, because that's what it seems like. I mean, one minute they're sitting there talking to you fine, the next minute they're just, all over the place, and they're telling you what they're hearing and seeing, and you're not seeing or hearing a damn thing. Some of them can even get violent, probably out of fear. They think that they're protecting themselves, and it could be from you. They may look at you and all of a sudden you take the shape and form of a monster, and they'll kill you, depending on how bad the schizophrenic is, how bad the disease is in that person. And, well, usually if they're on medication, they're not going to do that. Very, very rarely will a schizophrenic person have an episode if they're taking their medication correctly. Most of the time, bless their hearts, they're just kind of zoned out, drug out, because they have to, that's pretty strong. And can you even imagine? They had some people come to the psych hospital that I worked at, and they actually had a simulator that we all, sorry, this kitten is demanding attention, had this simulator that we all, let go of my hair, that we all went to get to see how, the best way they could show us how the mind of a schizophrenic works. And we went in this room, all the lights were out, and they had us put on this mask, and you and earphones. You are now in the mind. You are this person that's schizophrenic walking around, and it shows you how they see everything, how they hear everything. And I guarantee you, I guarantee you, when I come out of that room, I was like, oh my gosh, them poor people. I mean, can you imagine having to walk around like that? I mean, they think everybody's talking about them. If anybody looks at them and smiles, they're automatically, upset. Well, because it was like, what are you smiling at me for? You're after me. And it's not like your normal narcissist, saying, oh, well, what are they talking about, blah, blah, and then go on. This is an individual that will flip the hell out and maybe on you. What are you staring at me for? Blah, 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 Or in their mind, you might have just looked over at them and smiled like we do, a nice greeting, at Walmart or whatever. Maybe that's what you did, and then you turn your head, but to that person, the way they're seeing you is, and say you're talking to the person you went to Walmart with about what you're going to do later that day. Well, we're going to go home, put up these groceries, and, maybe we'll take the kids to the park. Well, this schizophrenic is still over here on this other line watching you, because they're already thinking, they already have it in their head that you're against them, that you're plotting against them. So they're watching you. And when you go to talk to this other person, now this other person's involved. Now you're talking to this other person about how to get at them. This is a nonstop battle that goes on in their head, and they actually see these things, and they actually hear the voices telling them, do you see her talking to him? Do you see her talking to him? You know what she's talking to him about. They're going to get you when you go walk out of that store. blah, blah, blah. This is what this person is hearing. I'm not going to make this whole class on schizophrenia. You can research that on your own. But no, if you're having those episodes, you cannot sit down at your altar. First of all, that's the last thing you'd be thinking of, probably, because you probably already think, that there is already people around you that aren't, or you're hearing voices. Mainly, they hear them. I've heard of very, very, very few cases that they actually seen. It's usually, audio that they're hearing these voices talk to them. And in the old days, yes. I mean, how many people would have probably been diagnosed with schizophrenia that back then they just assumed they were possessed. It's a possession by the devil, are just highly sensitive sockets, and native culture people with disorder are seen as holy. I do agree, though, some schizophrenic people are beyond help. Yeah, and that's right. Back in the, it just all depends on the culture that these people were living in and around, how it was accepted. Nowadays, we do know it's a mental disorder. Now, usually as witches, if we see or hear things, we think in our mind that we're normal. Okay, we're witches for one, so we are not normal. Let's get that out there. We are not the norm as far as human beings go. No, we are not. We are totally different creatures. But we know most of the times when we hear these or see this stuff, we are open to that, or we've evoked it. It's not, when we're walking down the aisle at Walmart that all of a sudden there's a voice in our head going, hey, there's a person on the other aisle that is, I just heard them talking about you. They're saying, this and that, and this nonstop nagging voice in your ear. That is not what witches do. But I agree, a lot of these mental disorders could very easily be linked to otherworldly things. I mean, the possibilities are endless, truly. Nowadays, our technology is so much better. Our medical technology is so much better that we're understanding the brain more, these conditions more, what causes these conditions, if anything actually causes them. Well, something causes them, but whether it's trauma, whether it's just a misfiring, that a blood vessel that's going haywire in the head, or a certain part of the brain that isn't working correctly or over correctly. Back in the old days, they didn't have that kind of technology. And who's like, people always talk about telekinesis and telepathy, where you can just look at each other and talk without using your vocal cords. They say that one day we'll be able to do that as man evolves. I mean, and who's to say? I mean, we think we're the generation, in our lifetimes that we've figured all this out. Of course, it'll never be all figured out, but we are way more advanced than it was, say, 200 years ago by far. So 200 years from now, I mean, I won't be here. Most of the people that are watching me right now, or that ever do watch, most of the people on this earth right now won't be here. But you see what I'm trying to say. They'll probably look back at us and go, wow, they were cavemen. How could they not know how to do this? I mean, look at the early cavemen themselves when man was first here. As far as their brain capacities and the knowledge that, I mean, they were like brand new. They were an empty slate. And it's just amazing. This is one thing that I absolutely love about the being in and around the medical field. It is so interesting how the brain works. I mean, it is just an amazing organ. I mean, it's definitely a computer. So, you think about it. If you have a short in a computer, it may not be messing with what you see and deal with, and but way in the background, it's messing with something else. Eventually, it'll reveal itself after it goes on for X amount of time. I honestly think a lot of witches have an overactive imagination, but I don't see a problem with having an over imagination. Yeah. That is just where it comes down to each individual. I mean, that this is why, not just as witches, but as human beings in general, we're all so different. How we react to things, how we perceive things, all that stuff. I have no idea what happened to the cat's water bowl. But, if you're taking medication and you're schizophrenic, I'm not going to say one way or the other whether you should or should not practice. Number one, if you were to get a message from a god or goddess or a spirit, how are you going to know that it's not just something that your mind's making up that you hear all the time? Or it just seems like things would be a lot more confusing. I'm not saying don't practice. I'm just saying it would be hard to decipher it. And everybody says, well, I'd know if it was or not. Well, no, they wouldn't, because that part of their brain is not functioning right. They cannot distinguish it. I assure you, people with schizophrenia would much rather not have that disease, that condition. They just cannot. I mean, it's like having a nightmare. Say you're asleep. Well, in your nightmare, you don't know that you're asleep. You're just scared. You're scared to death. And then you wake up and go, oh, that was a nightmare. Well, this is kind of like how I would think schizophrenia would be like, but you're wide awake. How exhausting. And I have extreme pity for those kind of people, but they're also very dangerous. They are very dangerous. Right here in Oklahoma, I believe it was in Enid. Don't quote me on the Enid part, but somewhere up around Oklahoma City, they had a teenage boy that was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And unbeknownst to them, which I don't know why they weren't checking his medications. If my child had that, a severe disorder like that, I would definitely make sure he was taking his medication every day. I mean, I would go as far as to stand there and watch him take it like I do my patients or my residents. Just for his own safety and his own health. Because these people, if the right firing mechanism goes off up there, they will kill you. That's all there is to it. out of being mad, scared. They're just not literally in their right mind at that moment. If I keep my room clean and do my laundry, does rather make me a real witch. Shut up, Hayden. I don't know, does it? A good witch is an organized witch. Do I need to send you an email every day and say, Aiden, is your house clean? But anyway, this person asked me this question, and I don't know why. I don't know if maybe they have the disorder, if they know somebody does, if the, whatever. But I'm not saying don't practice, by no means. I just don't know how you would be able to put out the spell. Now, if you're having a good day, probably so. There'll be some witches that will tell you that if you're on any kind of medication, that you cannot be an effective witch. Well, I holler bullshit on that one, because probably 80% of the world population, I'll go down to 70 for sure, are on some sort of medication. Not necessarily, an antipsychotropic or psychotropic or, something like that, but some sort of medication, whether it be for high blood pressure. They talk about any sort of brain altering drug don't do well. What do you think ayahuasca is? A lot of witches will do acid, hence the flying ointment. Those herbs just were actually a different form of acid that we would consider taking acid per se today, to get that full effect. The only problem with that is it would lead me to wonder if I really experienced that or if it was just a drug. That's why I would not do any sort of divination I don't do drugs, period. But I just would not be one of these women that would go and just take the flying ointment. First of all, it's extremely dangerous. Second of all, why? All that is messing with your brain. Of course, you're going to think you're flying. Of course, you're going to, and it could be extremely dangerous. Can you imagine a bunch of women, hopping around on brooms thinking they're flying and they jump off rooftops? Well, they're probably not going to continue to fly. They're going to fly, flat themselves on the ground below. I wish you knew how to use StreamYard so I could join your live. Well, you do though, right? I don't even know that I have StreamYard. I don't have any idea what the hell that is, Aiden. Do you want to do a live with me on mental disorders? Now, granted, I'm no doctor or psychiatrist or, a psychologist, anything like that. I'm just literally going off of what I've learned out of nursing in the last 21, 22 years, however long, 23, I don't even know now. 15, wow, 27 years. Anyway, a long time. And places I've worked, experience and classes I've taken in college and in technical schools. And I thought you had your PhD. I do. And life. No, but I mean, I kind of almost didn't want to answer that, but I always try to answer everybody's questions, whether it just be my point of view or not. Um, I had to really think about that one for a little while. But I do think that if you're on your medication and you can think clearly, at least clearly enough to get your spell, supplies gathered up and put that intention in there. That intention is what makes that spell. And without the ability to use your brain that way, then it can't be done. So, but as far as agoraphobia, it's that does not that in no way hinders you from being a witch or doing your work. Um, Actually, most witches, I would say, have a little of the agoraphobia in all of us. Most of us don't, especially the older witches. We don't really care to be around a whole bunch of people. But not because of being afraid, yeah, as in sheer panicked, like the condition will make you feel, but because of the bad energy, which could be construed as the same thing. Um, you don't want their negative energy on you. So, and some witches are very empathic. So when they're around a bunch of people, they're constantly getting all these, feelings and yucky stuff floating around their air, and so that bothers them. Um, it's not necessarily as they're afraid to go out just because they have a mental disorder, or some people might say that's a mental disorder. So how do you discern what medical disorders that we have in the medical books that are defined, and which ones are almost just like the ones that are defined, but they aren't necessarily called a condition or disease? So, I don't know. Now, there is one part, I'm not going to mention a name, but if Lady Blind Wolf was on here, she'd know who I was talking about, and you probably do too, Aiden, because you're real good friends with Lady Blind Wolf, and I'm sure that she's spoken to you about this. But there is one person on YouTube that claims to be a witch that is, I think she's just as crazy as batshit. Poor bats. Nothing she says makes any sense to me, and she's definitely somebody that I would think has a mental condition. And this is what I told Lady Blind Wolf. I was like, I can't. I just laughed. I mean, I couldn't even actually get mad at her because she was just so out there that, she's just literally making a total fool of herself. I would feel bad for someone that can't tell reality from fantasy. Yeah, and that's what's scary, because they really can't tell the difference. Um, as I said, the best way I'd know how to describe it would be walking around in a dream all the time. You don't know if you're dreaming or if you're actually wide awake. But there's help for that. There's so much help out there nowadays for anyone that has a mental condition. And some of these disorders will get people so, depressed that even on their good days, they're depressed. So they don't have any good days. It just would really be of an extremely hard life, and there's where your suicides come in, and people finally being put in mental hospitals and not ever getting to leave, because finally they just either, I guess, give up, or it just completely consumes their brains and they can't come back. It's just extremely sad. And unfortunately, as great as, our medical teams are, and our scientists and people like that are always, the CDC and the AMA, everybody's always involved in trying to make people's health better, mental and physical health. It's amazing that we haven't come up. Well, I'm sure, if you look it up, it'll probably tell you the genetics of it, or the genesis, maybe how it starts, what part of the brain's being affected, if there's always just that one part, or if different schizophrenics have it in different parts that it's affecting. I haven't studied up on it in a long time. I haven't had any reason to. That may be something I do here in a minute before I go to sleep, but because I'm always doing research on something. Something will cross my head and I don't know anything about it. It's like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything else. I'll research it. This is how I get my information. I research most of my stuff that I tell y'all. But this term is so large. I mean, you would just have to research it yourself and come up with your own conclusions, because and I guess, what my opinion might be, as usual, something different from any other witch that would, like I said, some think that if you have any sort of disorder, you can't be a witch. Well, then there would be no witches, because most people nowadays have some sort of disorder or condition. I would guarantee it. Especially if you look hard enough, even if it boils down to just sheer narcissism. I guarantee you, because no one's perfect. We're all just human, and we count on this thing up here, and when it misfires, it just misfires. I have a bug crawling on my wall, and so sorry, y'all. I don't know where he went now. Damn it. Where'd he go? Couldn't hardly get him. He was in it's one of them little outside bugs. Damn it. What the hell? I don't like bugs. Anyway, sorry about that. I had to try to kill that, but that's my opinion on it. As long as you can concentrate long enough to put a spell together and put it out there, then I don't see any problem of anybody having any condition, even schizophrenia. Now, if you're having an episode, of course, I wouldn't recommend you sitting down at the altar. No telling what you think you're hearing, or maybe you might think, a goddess is telling you to go kill your neighbor. I don't know. That's kind of a tricky question. If there was one that I would be leery of in the craft, it would be a schizophrenic. And I'm sorry if anybody that watches me has this disorder, and I'm so sorry. But I'm being honest about it. You just never know when they're going to flip the script. And they may, then we'll have another one in witchcraft going, well, next thing you know, you're hearing in the news, well, this person killed their neighbor because the goddess so-and-so told them to do it because they claim to be a witch. Well, there's another bad rap on the witches. If you're on your medication, you've been taking it correctly and doing everything your doctor tells you to do, most all schizophrenics that follow doctor's orders have a productive and good life. So in that instance, yes, I think you could probably, even schizophrenics could be good witches. But if they miss their medication or have a bad day, well, more than likely, the going to that altar may be the last thing on their mind anyway. It's usually their mind's so cluttered and they're hearing so many voices at one time that they're so confused that they could make a decision in any way. And I'm so sorry for them people. I mean, I'm so thankful that, I mean, I have had a lot of things go on in my life and with family, and that condition is just something that is very unpredictable. And truly, you just literally have to watch those kind of people all the time. And it's kind of unnerving because you just never truly know when they're going to go off on you. I had this one girl. She was probably 17. She wasn't an adult yet because her mother had to sign for her to be in our hospital. She couldn't sign for herself. And when she came in, she was extremely quiet when we were doing the intake. She was extremely quiet, and she'd smile whenever I'd ask her a question. She'd just smile at me and then answer. She seemed like a very, very sweet young girl. Well, later on that afternoon, when I went through the units to do whatever I was doing, there was a lot of many reasons I went through the units, but when I went through there, I heard all this commotion, and she had an episode, and our resident psychiatrist had prescribed her medication, but we didn't have any on hand. We were having to wait for the pharmacy to deliver some. So he had to pretty much give her a shot, which is is a very last resort nowadays. But she was going to harm herself or somebody else if the doctor hadn't done that. And it just amazed me. And the things that she was saying, you could just tell that she had flipped over. And I often wonder how that little girl has done, because once they leave the hospital, we never see them again or hear from them unless they were brought back. And it's really sad. But anyway, I'll get off all that. But to answer the question, depending on how severe the medical disorder is or the mental disorder is, even at that, if you're on your medication, you're taking it correctly, I don't see why you could not practice. Now, if you start having these episodes, and like I said, they're probably not even going to be thinking about, going to an altar anyway. All kinds of other things are going to be going on in their heads, but I don't know. But anyway, I was going to say one more thing, but No, I forgot what it was. But that is strictly my opinion on that. I thought about it for quite a while before I made the video on it. I'm not a doctor by any means. I've just worked in the field and around them, and that's just strictly my opinion on it. But and like I said, anybody can always do what they want. It doesn't matter what I say or what any other witch says. And we're not going to know if you're an effective witch or not. You know, I mean, it's not really any of our business. But when I'm asked the question, I can only answer it the best way I know how. And this is the only way I know how to do the mental. And I think I've touched on this before. But I honestly think being in the craft could help some mental disorders. I truly do, because of the meditation techniques, because of the feeling of oneness with your God or goddess and in nature, and the calming sensation that it can bring if you do it right. To understand, you know, that we are just creatures ourselves. We're not perfect. We are infallible, and or fallible. But you see what I'm trying to say. I'm getting tired, and so I'm starting to ramble. About time for me to take medicine. Speaking of medicine, as y'all know, I take medicine, but it's, you know, not mental medicine. It is for my heart issues and stuff like that. But anyway, I love you guys. And as far as the agoraphobia, that should not affect, you know, that doesn't even matter. Most witches, like I said, try to stay away from those places anyway. And maybe this is what I was originally going to say about agoraphobia before I got off on schizophrenia. Maybe that's our subconscious way of protecting ourselves from bad energy, and that's the way it's always been. It's not necessarily the people. I mean, it is the people you're afraid of in the wide open spaces. But why do you think as witches we wear the talismans and stuff, protection talismans around our necks when we go out in public, and rings, and do our incantations on ourselves? Some even enchant their clothes because they are so paranoid about bad energy befalling them. So there you have it. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, many different people, many different views. That was mine. So I'm going to get off here, and we'll chat with y'all later on. Bye-bye.